Hello, hello. We are here to talk about the season 15 reunion part 2 of Atlanta, and I am so glad that it's over, y'all. But I will say, not like for completely negative reasons, but I'm just like, it was just a lot. And like the reunion for me was not giving in part 1, but I will say that this part was a lot better. But we do still have a lot to chat about. So let's get into it. We start and we are back on this whole like Drew versus Courtney thing. They kind of pick up immediately where they left off last episode, and it's basically the part where Drew is, because it seems like they started to get into like a conversation, and like I said last time, we weren't gonna get much meat in that sandwich, so they kind of skipped over it just to get to some like screaming and bantering, because I guess that's what type of television they wanted to show us. So they're showing them screaming and audible things at each other for a little while, and then Drew gets into the whole thing where she's like, "Don't bring up my son." And she's like, Ralph was coaching you. Like that's kind of only tidbits that we got from it that they gave us. Don't bring him on my son. Ralph was coaching you all season. Whatever. The thing that I did pull from that, and a little bit of a sound bit, as long as I didn't hear it incorrectly, because again it was just all this stuff jumping on top. But what I believe I heard was Courtney say, because she defends herself, but she's like, "I wasn't talking about your son," and everybody's like, "Yeah, you were," including Andy, and they bring up this hot mic moment. But Courtney defends herself and says what I think I heard. She says it wasn't a hot mic moment, like she meant to say it. So I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think that that was a good thing to say. I don't think that she should bring up kids, I guess. Not even I guess, but I mean I guess, because this didn't feel like that instance to me. I feel like now, like, don't bring up the kids is just such a hashtag of its own for this show. Like, they just say it, they just kind of throw it out there, because at the end of the day, it was a situation pertaining to her child, so yes, but I think it was more so of a dig at Drew, like, you're trying to get your child taken care of. It wasn't necessarily that she said anything negative about the child, but I can understand it in both ways, like, just don't bring up the child at all. I mean, from what I said last episode, it just felt random at the end of the day, but, cool. And I guess with the point of, like, Ralph coaching her all season, like, I guess I'm just not invested. Like I said, I feel like if they were gonna give us this big Courtney and Drew fight thing, then it should have pushed something forward, and it just didn't. Like, we didn't really get any information here. Courtney does say that Ralph decided on the divorce after their Portugal trip, and it was because he had, finally gotten all the information in relation to Drew, like, cheating on him, I guess. And Courtney knows this because Ralph told her, so we already know how, like, meritable that information is. But okay, not really anything crazy, though. Andy then switches over and he puts Candy in it, and he's just like, what was this whole thing with Drew talking about she had a crush on Ty? We've talked about this before. So, Candy gives the story that Drew made this joke in the presence of Mayetta and a stylist or whatever on set, saying that if her marriage didn't work out or whatever, if she was to be into women, it would be Ty. Ty knew people on set. Ty was not there that day. However, after Drew made that comment, somebody reached out to Ty and she started showing up to set from that point on. And then that's how this all started. So I guess, but we learned, some of us, I guess, learned that information on Speak On It. So again, nothing new for me, but I guess in terms of the reunion, it's good information to have. But it was very, for me, I'm a context girl, so I just feel like when you drop stuff like that, and this is supposed to be like the main thing, like Drew's stuff is supposed to be the main thing, I just feel like give me some more context instead of just dropping it, because as somebody that heard about it on Speak On It, I feel like I got the context, so it was just kind of like a I already know type of thing. But for people that are watching it and hadn't seen Speak On It and hadn't gotten that story, I feel like they could have given it more. But whatever. Andy moves over to the other side of the couch and he's asking them, like, well, is there any truth to what Ralph is saying about this whole cheating thing or whatever? And I think he specifically said Marlo and Sheree. Marlo's like, I'm just not going to get into it, which is So interesting how she chooses to be in certain things and not be in certain things. But that's not really shade to Marlo because I know she doesn't really care for Drew either. So she could have easily gotten there and got some digs on Drew. It's just interesting that she decided not to today. But okay. Sheree, awkwardly enough, decides to, first of all, she gives us this statement of, well, I really just don't want to be in the middle of it. But then she proceeds to say that she received some information or some documentation pertaining to Drew having an inappropriate relationship with Todd. And not only does she bring it up, because that's already flag number one, she then reaches back behind her to get that same manila envelope as last time with the She News. So it's just like, you don't want to be in the middle of it, but you're bringing this up that nobody knew, and then you also brought documentation to back it up. So that just kind of felt like to me, like, was this prompted? Like, did Andy know that Sheree brought some information pertaining to this, so then he had to bring it up? It fell really flat for me. Another part of, so the whole thing with, like, similar to what I'm saying about the whole, like, how they met, how Ty and Drew met situation. We just need more context here, right? So Sheree has now brought out these documents that were clearly prompted and produced to be introduced in this segment, and we don't even get one read to us. Like, we have no idea what they say, right? Like, Andy looks at them, which I thought that was an unfair edit to Drew. Andy looks at them, and from his perspective, from his glance, he says, well, these are really incriminating. And, like, that's a clip that we've seen 500 times to promote this reunion. So we're thinking, oh, it's got to be something incriminating in there. And then Kenya and Candy read it, and they're like, I don't really see anything incriminating in here. And they don't have any reason to take up for Drew because they're not really, well, Candy more so. Candy's not on the same page with Drew, so I believe that they were really analyzing them for their own selves, and they felt like there's nothing incriminating here. And they showed that on TV. So now we're getting two different perspectives of the text messages. Well, really three, because Sheree has introduced them. We've got Andy saying they're incriminating, and then we've got Candy and Kenya saying that they're not. So y'all are discussing them amongst yourselves and creating your own analysis of them, but you're not going to allow the viewers to. Like, that just didn't make any sense. So, that was an interesting thing as well. I just feel like they could have at least, how I do the little flash, like, it would have taken no time away from anything. Like, you could have kept the dialogue going in the back about whatever the heck they were going to talk about, and then flash the text messages on the screen if you would like. So that leads me to believe that there was actually nothing there, because if there was, then they would have shown it, I would have guessed. So that fell flat for me as well. The weird part, though, was that Drew wouldn't confirm whether they were, real text messages or not. She seemed to feel like these weren't incriminating either. Like, she did a review of them. It didn't look like she did. Like, it was more like a cursory review. It didn't look like she really went through them. So that kind of led me to believe, like, oh, she looked at them and acknowledged that they were her texts, but she's just like, whatever, girl, I'm moving on. But, she was then asked, like, are these there? She's like, I didn't really look at them. I don't know, da-da-da. And the ladies are like, so I don't know. But I still feel like there was nothing there. So for her to not, like, admit that they're hers, maybe it's just because she's in the sense of, like, deny, deny, deny. But those things just didn't really come together for me. They end this segment. This part of the reunion wasn't as, like, jumping around and as crazy as the first part, but it did have some weird moments, of course. So they end this segment, no resolve, no type of conclusion, no nothing. And they jump immediately, like, we're going on a break, and Andy's just like, oh, and Mayetta, I think it's so cool that you have this orphanage. And he's like, how long have you had it? And she's like, 11 years. And I said this on the review when she brought it up, and I believe they were in Portugal. Stop talking about it if you're not going to show it to us, because that's actually important, and that's actually something that we should see. And it's honestly frustrating that we're not going to. I'm going to assume that we're never going to see it. I don't even know if Mayetta's going to be back. And that's no shade to Mayetta. It's just, I don't know what the heck is going on with the show and with production. So I believe in my heart of hearts that we're never going to see it on the show, at least. We're not going to get any information about it on the show, at least. And even if we do, we didn't get it when we should have. So why even bring it up now? So I just thought that was silly. It's kind of like, when kids telling themselves, like, you're not even talking about the situation or what's going on, and they just come in, they tell them themselves. Like, when production mentions these things, or like shows us uncut deleted scenes and stuff like that they didn't go into detail in and didn't give us context on and didn't elaborate on, it's like you're telling on yourself, and that your edit is Not awesome. We come back, the ladies are on a lunch, and we get a scene that I never ever want to see. But of course, we get Sheree coming into the dressing room with Marlo, and they get to have their little kiki moment. And Marlo is really hyping up Sheree. Like, of course, we weren't there, so maybe Sheree was really eating it on the set. But from what I can see on the television, like, I was not excited by anything that Sheree did. But Marlo's hyping her up, and she's like, "Oh, girl, like let me see this She News." And Sheree goes into this. We've talked about this ad nauseum. Sheree goes into this detail of like, the only reason that I did this stuff with Candy is because like every week, and I'm assuming she's talking about on Speak on It, or maybe even on the show. I don't know, but maybe both because they air on the same days. And she's just like every week she's talking about She by Sheree, and it's just like Sheree, like, oh my God, everybody, including the woman that you are speaking to, has had something to say about She by Sheree. So that happens. We also get this snippet of Courtney coming in and like hugging Ralph in a very like what felt like intimate hug, in my opinion. I'm not gonna say anything beyond that, but that was weird. They're very excited to see each other, and she's kind of like, I guess they're discussing what had happened thus far. I don't know. I didn't listen too much to the conversation because what was happening here was that then Allison, Drew's sister, comes walking by the room, and Courtney's back is against the door talking to Ralph, but Ralph can see it. The door is like parallel to him, so he kind of glances over and looks back. No big deal. And then I guess Courtney kind of peeped, and it was like, you're having conversation. You're like, well, you want this to be like a quiet conversation. So Courtney kind of turns and she touches the door, and Allison's standing there, and she catches Allison. To me, it didn't feel like she caught Allison and then touched the door to close it. It felt like she was touching the door and saw Allison, and Allison was immediately like, don't close that door in my face. So, even if she wasn't attempting to close it, she was holding it. So it's like, oh, now, girl, now that you see me, let me let you know, don't close this door on my face. So I don't know what the order of the events was, but that occurred and it didn't go any further. I guess it was an interesting thing to see, but there wasn't much to it. But okay, I do like Allison. So, I mean, I guess if you had to give us some scenes, it didn't take too much time away, I guess. What did take way too much time away and what was completely unnecessary is we do a whole segment about the ladies' talks about like intercourse and things like that. And this again just feels like something from the Real Housewives of Atlanta rubric that we throw in there because it's familiar and it's part of the edit, and it's like these ladies talk about intercourse a lot, but it's like all the Housewives franchises tend to talk about intercourse a lot because it's a reality TV, and in real life a lot of friend groups talk about intercourse a lot. So I do understand that there were segments in the season where they talked about intercourse, and Candy had her bedroom Candy anniversary, and we got this whole Drew thing going on with the movie, and we talked about Twi a lot. Great, got it good. I get it, but none of those things are super important to the fact where we need to have a whole segment about them. And when I say segment, I mean literally making it a point to show us them have a full conversation, dialogue, ask, question, and answer about it. And not only that, we get a montage leading into it, which means that it's a real segment because they've put all these scenes together to get us introed into this segment. So that was just a supreme waste of time. I'm not sure why we did that. I was sitting through it wondering if it was going to segue into something maybe that was a little bit more important, that was a little more related. Maybe I was missing something. But awkwardly enough, they segue from there into talking about Sonya's miscarriage, which I thought was obviously an extremely important story. And I said in the video, my past video, one of the better parts of the season, even though it was shown on the B-roll, like it was really an important story. So I feel like honestly, if they were going to come back from break, they could have cut that and went straight to Sonya and talked about some personal story that actually really mattered. But it was nice, similar to what they did on the B-roll. It was nice to see how much time they gave Sonya to talk about it and to, give us some information. What was disappointing to me was that it felt calculated that Sonya would take this opportunity to I'm even getting really like just kind of disgusted about it as I talk about it right now. Like literally, like this was such an important topic. Like, and it was such a good story to hear, and it's relatable. Even Andy says, like, I'm pretty sure with this story, like, you're gonna relate to a lot of women out there. And she takes this opportunity, which is it's ending off so positive because she says how a month after her miscarriage, she got pregnant again. Everybody's so congratulatory and great, but she takes this moment to point out Kenya, and she gives this big intro to it too. She's naming people. She's like, when it happened, we had the group chat, and so and so sent me flowers, and so did this. Candy FaceTimed me. Like, she's literally doing all of this to narrow it down intentionally, and then say, but Kenya, I really felt like you didn't care. And it's just like, I'm trying to figure it out. Like, I like to see things from two perspectives. So I'm trying to, even if that was the case, because obviously we get Kenya saying that that didn't happen. So now this isn't even really about what Sonya said anymore. It's now become a back and forth. Not even a back and forth necessarily, because they didn't go back and forth. But it's a he say, she say now of, well, she's saying that Kenya didn't reach out, and Kenya saying, well, I did reach out. So now it's like, okay, either of the two can be true, but now it's literally taking away from what was important at the end of the day, and we really could have kept it there. Now, on the other side of the perspective that I'm really going to try my best to see, in the event that it is true that Kenya didn't reach out, I think it's going to fall in line with the same concept of, well, why wouldn't you come to her and say that? Because I'm assuming this happened quite a while ago. So if you felt that way about what happened with Kenya, why didn't you bring that up then? Right? Like, I can understand you feeling some type of way about it, but what I think is the issue is the way you're addressing it. You're choosing now to address it on the reunion to try to make a point that Kenya didn't do something, and I just thought that that was really gross. At the end of the day, like, I don't even like that. Really, like, immediately turned me off because I'm just like, for why? But it doesn't stop there. It continues because we start to talk about, which I was surprised they really got into. We start to talk about Sonya's event that she did with the auction for Mommy Nation, and it's brought up that the one side of the couch with Candy and Kenya and them are just like, well, Sonya, your homegirls weren't even really trying to donate money. Like, Marlo didn't even raise her paddle at the end of the day. Marlo nor Sheree raised their paddle. And, the story, we saw the episode. Sheree only raised her paddle because Kenya called her out specifically on the spot. And then Marlo only raised her paddle because I believe she was called out by the people at the table. I would say it's Candy. So both of them had to be called out before they would even raise their paddle. The T there obviously is like, that was your homegirls, that's your alliance. They're not supporting you, but you always make it a we don't support you type of thing, right? Given this information, Sonya then justifies completely Marlo's point, which sounded so silly. She's like, well, Marlo told me she was gonna give money, but she didn't want to raise her paddle because Kenya was doing the auction. What? Like, you're here to support your homegirl's event. Your homegirl's event is the auction. So whoever's hosting the auction, it shouldn't matter. If you're going to support, you need to participate in the auction. So that just doesn't even make any sense. And it's so crazy that Sonya would justify that. And then Sheree gives this whole thing of like, well, I was the first one to send my money. That's not the point. The point of the matter is that you weren't raising your paddle to give any money. It didn't seem like you were going to give any money until you were prompted. But, Sonya moves past that as well. Like, she never holds them accountable for anything. But it's always Candy and Sheree are the issue. Candy and Kenya are the issue. And Sonya, again, this is when it really hit me. Sonya, again, uses another opportunity to say, okay, well, yeah, we had that event. But, like, Kenya, it seems like you only hosted the auction because we were on camera. Like, you're only a friend of me on camera. And when she's saying that, like, Kenya immediately cuts her off. Like, girl, please. Like, are you kidding me? And yeah, same, because like, first of all, Sonya, this all happened again on camera. Like, you literally called her because you lost your auctioneer. Well, it probably was like day of or whatever, close to, and you asked Kenya on camera to host the auction, and she immediately said yes. So she was using that to call Kenya like calculated. So it's just like, how is she calculating that you asked her to host? She didn't ask to do that. Like, she didn't say, oh, we're filming this event, let me see if I can host the auction. That never happened. And then speaking of calculated, somebody pointed that out on Twitter, like, you're the one that's being calculated because you literally just brought up two moments that happened or two feelings that you feel like happened as it pertains to Kenya off camera. You're purposely bringing them up now on the reunion to create this moment with Kenya and paint a story about her. Like, that's calculated. You're literally saying, oh, my miscarriage happened off camera, you weren't supportive, like you didn't reach out to me. And oh, like in other instances, I feel like you only want to be my friend off camera, but when we're on camera, you're doing supportive things. Okay, so call her out off camera when those things happen. But then we move on from that with no resolution. But of course, Andy now wants to talk about Candy Speak On It, which I think is so. I think it's so funny because they kind of did the same thing with one or two of the reunions of Married to Medicine with Heavenly's YouTube channel. And first of all, I think it's just so maybe once, right? But I think it's just so counterproductive to keep talking about these ladies, other platforms where they share their opinions. Because why is it bad that Candy has an opinion about these ladies on a different platform when they get on this platform and they throw dirt on her name all the time? Like, why are we even shedding light to that? And I say that because it seems like they try to make it an issue that Candy has this platform and some shade gets thrown at y'all. Like, y'all throw shade everywhere else. So that the premise, the real tea is that y'all are upset that she has a successful platform that people watch and they reference and they talk about all the time. It's way more exciting than these episodes of Real Housewives of Atlanta. Let's keep it a buck. And people are talking about them. I'm even somebody, when Speak On It first came out, I was like, girl, what? I'm not trying to hear that. And I literally got into it because it was just way more entertaining than the episodes and there's way more context and it just makes more sense. And because Candy's not on there just trying to give her own perspective, she literally invites everybody from the cast to come on there. So that's another thing. Like, how are you upset that on that platform shade tends to get thrown at y'all, but y'all have the same opportunity to go on that platform and say whatever you want to say? Y'all are choosing not to. So that's silly to me. But anyway, Candy invites y'all to come. She has other content creators that come on there and they challenge her when they come on there. And then she also has like Jamie who will challenge things too. Like, it literally is so many different moving parts on that YouTube channel. I think it's so silly and counterproductive that we even bring it up and try to make it seem like it's an issue because it's just not at the end of the day. So I think that that's silly. Candy kind of gathers that on up. And she's like, I mean, they do it all the time. Like, so I'm just giving it back. Like, let's carry on. Like, who cares?
Oh, I'm just giving them back what they've been giving me. So carry on.
I guess there was also a comment, I don't remember when it happened or where it happened, but where Sheree said that maybe Candy should take a break from the show because people say she's so boring and she doesn't share and blah, 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 blah. And I did clock how Candy was like, girl, you would know everything about breaks. Because it's like, yeah. And Sheree brings up this weak argument. She's like, well, I've been asked back to the show more than I've left the show. The fact is that you had to be asked back in the first place. Why did you get released from the show in the first place? That's what we're talking about. Yeah. We move on to the Marlo versus Candy. There's literally nothing new here except for the fact that Marlo is just like, she's trying to explain because Andy asked her like, okay, so why did this 2 year ago instance where when the incident happened with her family member, he asked why did this come up 2 years later? And she literally posed it as, well, there was an incident at Candy's restaurant. So why would that naturally not trigger what happened to my nephew that happened, 2 years ago? And it's like, what? Like, what do you mean, why wouldn't it trigger? Because it wouldn't trigger. Like, those two situations, they don't have anything to do with each other. That's the whole point. Candy basically responds to this because she keeps trying to make it seem like it's a non-issue. Like, her and that whole side of the couch just keep saying, like, it wasn't necessarily about a Marlo thing. It's just that you don't share. And we even got, like, a fan question about that. And it's just, like, so weird that that's even a stance on Candy. Like, we know literally everybody in her family and everybody that works for her. Like, we've seen it all on this show. So I don't get the not sharing thing. And Candy highlights, which she talked about on Speak On It, and I'm happy we got to see this as well. I was surprised. She highlights that, they're talking about, well, they have to hold her feet to the fire, but nobody said anything to Sheree about her website not working. Like, nobody was like, oh, we have to hold Sheree's feet to the fire. So she's like, why do you have to do that? And Marlo's like, well, you and I were friends for over 14 years. And Candy's like, girl, we were never really friends. Like, what are you talking about? And if we were friends, why would you have to hold my feet to the fire in such a negative way on TV? Like, you would bring that to me and hold me accountable as a friend. So what are you talking about? The Candy surmises that, Marlo just does this because she's jealous of her. Like, she's jealous of every time Candy has success, and that's 100% accurate. What was crazy to me in that moment was Marlo acting so surprised that it was stated. Girl, what? I was shocked to see this. We also get more of Sonya trying to like justify and reason and stick up for Marlo. She started out really well. She's like, Candy, I understand where you're coming from, and this is where Marlo was coming from. She honestly could have left it there because that's the meat of it. Like, at the end of the day, they both have different perspectives about it, and it just kind of is what it is. But she took that and then started giving more defense to Marlo's point. And Candy's just like, girl, like, they start having a back and forth, and Candy's like, we shouldn't be arguing about Marlo. Like, all season we were having back and forth as it pertains to Marlo. Like, you're supposed to be in the middle, right? Are you not? Are you not? Like,
So what I'm saying is,
You always be talking about you supposed to be in the middle, are you not?
no, I'm not. No,
Are you not?
Anyway.
Or Andy,
like, she really gathered her with that. Like, are you not supposed to be in the middle? And then Sonya, shut up, because at the end of the day, all you're doing is defending Marlo. Like, girl, and they use it as an opportunity to say, well, you have your friends that defend you, and it's just literally not the same at all. Like, literally, Sonya always says, I'm in the middle, and then jumps in every Marlo fight, and Sheree jumps in every Marlo fight, and they both justify everything that Marlo does. But they try to act like they're so neutral, and it's just like, oh, you both have different perspectives, but also, Candy, this is why you're wrong, and this is why Marlo's right. I don't get the gaslighting and acting like that's not what they're doing. Like, you know that you've chosen a side. So at the end of the day, if you have that side, that's fine to have that side, but stop trying to speak and be the mediator, because you're not mediating, you're defending. We finally get to the meat of the episode, and we're getting the Drew versus Ralph. This pushed things a little bit further. Like, I think this is the only moment in the reunion where things from the season were getting pushed forward. But I think that's because the ball was dropped with the whole Ralph and Drew storyline. So this was the only opportunity to get that information because we didn't get it in the season. And honestly, I enjoyed the Ralph having the first share over Sheree having it. Like, that was way more pleasing to me. Drew's whole thing is feeling like, at the end of the day, Ralph is here because Ralph wants to be here because he wants to make a scene. He wants to have a moment. She gives him a peach. I'm tired of those antics, but, she gives him a peach. Drew was visibly not trying to talk, though, when Ralph was out there. Like, we didn't get much on it from what I saw. It seemed like they were being asked a lot of questions by Andy, and it didn't seem like Drew was giving responses, and Ralph was. And Drew was kind of like facing the other way at one point almost. And King is like, you have to answer. Like, and it just felt like a girl, we're working. Like, just don't get in trouble. Like, you have to answer type of thing. So I appreciated that. And then we also get these tidbits of Ralph continuously saying, like, well, Drew, do you want to answer? So that indicated to me, like, maybe that's what was happening, but I don't know. But her big thing was like, I'm going to give you your moment. Like, you want a moment, so I'm going to give you your moment. At one point, she does start talking, though, and she does make a good point to Andy where she's like, and she admits it, which I appreciated the honesty, because I guess like a fan or viewer had asked, like, well, why did you guys seem so good during the season production, but now you're getting this divorce? And she's like, where there are things that I hid because I feel like marriage is sacred and I wanted to protect my husband. So I appreciated that honesty, that she's basically saying that, things were not shown because they weren't being real, on the show. So I appreciate the honesty there. Andy then asks both of them at different times, though, like, have you been faithful? He starts with Drew. Drew's like, yes, I didn't really buy that. And then he gets to Ralph, and Ralph doesn't answer. Like, he doesn't answer that question. He says something else, which is an indication that he's, seeking to lie. Because even Andy's like, well, that's not what I asked you. Like, have you been faithful? He claims yes. Drew gets upset, and I'm feeling, I like the context that I at least pulled from it. She's basically saying, like, she and Ralph had a conversation a couple days prior, and he was being apologetic. And I guess he mentioned having gotten fellatio from multiple women around the world. Like, he had really kind of had this conversation with her. He admitted to talking to Mimi Faust about the Thai stuff. I guess this all occurred. But now he gets on the reunion and kind of seems like, from Drew's perspective, allegedly, he's gaslighting her more and not being honest. So that gets her upset. So with that context that I pulled, I was able to better like dissect the scene. I also kind of feel like it was a thing where they both knew each other, were doing extramarital things with other people, and maybe there was some type of like understanding, or just like it is what it is type of thing. Like maybe also Ralph had been cheating for years, which she kind of alludes to because she said this has been a thing since 2017, since we were in Chicago. So maybe he had been cheating, and then, Drew was basically almost out of the marriage anyway. With the whole counseling thing where Ralph stopped going, and Ralph had been embarrassing her on this show for 3 years. So then finally she met Ty, and she was like, well, this is my chance. Like, really could have kind of been anything, and it's probably a combination of the two. I feel like they both kind of knew, and now they're having this conversation in front of us where it's just like, you lying and you know you lying, so why you lying? Like, they both kind of seem like they're both saying that to each other with moments of like, ooh, I wish you wouldn't have said that. Like, oh, that was supposed to be our tea. Seems like they both have tea here. Also kind of weird to see that like Drew, because the whole room kind of felt like they were like, well, Drew, the cheating rumor came from your assistant, which I don't know why that necessarily mattered, but they want to know who it came from, I guess. And I guess to take the blame off Ralph is what it felt. That's why I don't know why it mattered. It felt like it was for the reason of taking the blame off of Ralph. So I guess, but I don't think it mattered. But Drew, it's interesting that she was very firm and like, oh, my assistant didn't do that. So, I mean, I don't know. And she also says like, y'all are, speaking about things that you don't know, which is true. And she highlights again, like Ralph just had a conversation with me where he was very apologetic the other day. So, that makes me curious. And Ralph didn't seem, from the way it was edited at least, Ralph didn't seem necessarily respond when she was calling him out on that stuff. So that was interesting. Ultimately, Drew walks out because, we get the clip that we've been saying 100 times where he's like, Drew, you're acting right now, like whatever it is, what it is. And to me, she felt like she was being genuine, honestly. But, Ralph, for whatever reason, wasn't really engaged in the conversation at all. And like I said, he really wasn't responding to the what I felt like were facts. So for him to say like, well, let's have a real conversation, like you're acting right now, I felt like she was having a real conversation. I don't know what other alternative conversation he was trying to have. It didn't make any sense because he wasn't saying anything. We also get an interesting part backstage when Drew is collecting herself. She's talking to her sister, and Allison's like, well, why won't you bring up the private investigator? And she's like, I just don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to out that about my marriage on TV. So that's interesting, even though there also is a camera right here watching her say it backstage, but it was prompted by her sister. So I won't say that that's like a produced moment by Drew, but it was interesting. A, that she didn't want to share it, but B, that she shared it. So I don't know. I really honestly enjoy seeing Kenya give a different perspective to Ralph because she's done it before on the show, and it wasn't like a combative thing. It felt very just like, listen, like, I'm just trying to give you a different perspective. She was even laughing through it because, like, come on now, like, listen, come on. Like, when you're reasoning with somebody, you have to giggle a little bit because they're being ridiculous. And Ralph wasn't saying anything and giving any indicators, but I almost felt like he was listening. Like, I feel like he heard that lady. She made very good points, very good comparisons, very good examples, and I think she was really giving him something good to consider in not a combative way. And it was being filmed, but it wasn't like, oh, we're in the act of the reunion, because Drew's backstage and Andy's not doing anything. I don't even think he was sitting there. I don't know, but still, like, we're not actively filming the reunion right now, so it felt like a really like side part conversation, and it felt like he was listening up until Drew came back out, and he's kind of like, well, now I got to get back on my defense and be again. And he asked Kenya like, well, how long were you married? And she's like, why does that matter? Like, what does that have to do with me knowing that this is the same treatment that I was getting? So that was just whack to me. Like, I really thought we were getting somewhere, but it's Ralph. After that, we get Drew's performance, which I just thought was weird. Like, shout out to Drew for the song, and shout out to them for helping her showcase it. And it did sound like a good song, and she sounded amazing. But it was weird having to watch Ralph sit there front row and center, and then she's singing to him as well. Like, that was just cringy. But I guess if you enjoy TV like that, then fine. But continuity wise, like, what makes sense, reality wise, I just thought that was circus circus-like. And lastly, I really felt like it was a joke that Sheree got the outro speech at the end of the day, like the whole conclusionary speech to the reunion into the season. And Andy painted it as, oh, well, she's the peacemaker or whatever this season, but Sheree is the one with a manila envelope behind her back with receipts and she knows. But, you know, she claims in her little speech that she was trying to bring everybody together and that she's not going to stop. We know that you're not going to stop being Sheree. I can promise you that. My big note is I think I'll do another video with a recap of the season, but I think it's clear how I felt about the season, so we'll see. Let me know if y'all really want me to, though, and I will. But what I will say right now is I think it's supremely whack that they are promoting uncensored versions of the reunion behind a paywall that is Peacock. Because at the end of the day, there are going to be viewers that, even though you show it 100 times, they're still not going to pay attention to it. So they probably don't even know it exists. They probably don't really know what is meant by uncensored. So they probably don't even know that it's necessary to go watch it. And then, you know, maybe they don't have the means to watch it. Or maybe they're not that invested. They don't know how. So I'm saying that to say, like, there are going to be people that watch it on Peacock and that watch on Bravo. And I actually watched part 1 on Peacock, and it was substantively different. Like, there were some differences there, noted differences that would make a difference for a viewer. So why would you create a situation where some viewers are seeing this portion of the episode versus some viewers seeing it as this? Like, and there's like, I don't know, there's like no real incentive there except for the fact that it's like, well, we're going to put it behind a paywall. So it's almost kind of ableist. Like, damn, those who can watch this part and those who can't watch this part. Like, why would you do that? So that's super weird to me. And that's really all I have to say about it. I am super glad we're done with season 15. Again, I'm not going to summarize it. You can kind of surmise how I feel about it. But if you would like me to give a summary, I will be happy to. I will sit here and we can have a chat. But, you know, that was the reunion. Part 2 was substantially better than part 1. Substantially better, but still, thank y'all for watching my reviews of Atlanta.